Good evening, everyone. My name is Jonathan Gomwalk, and I will be the hearing officer for San Francisco Public Works. Cerise Waiters is the clerk for this hearing. This hearing is being recorded, and the sign-in sheet is on the table on the side of the room. Please be sure to sign in for our records, and so that, if necessary, we can contact you in the future regarding the item you are here for. The public hearing is being held to consider 5 appeals from property owners that were assessed fines for excessive or illegal pruning of trees, for not planting a replacement tree, or for illegally removing a tree. They are order number 200509 to consider the removal of 1 street tree, order number 200510 to consider the removal of 1 street tree. I'll start again. Order number 20059 to consider the removal of 1 street tree adjacent to 211 Yale Street. Order number 200510 to consider the removal of 1 street tree adjacent to 390 Arkansas Street. Order number 200511 to consider the removal of 2 street trees adjacent to 444-500 Franconia Street. Order number 200512 to consider the removal of 1 street tree adjacent to 601 Van Ness Avenue. Order number 200513 to consider the removal of 1 street tree adjacent to 1760 Alabama Street. My job as the hearing officer is to gather the facts for the hearing item, listen to your testimonies, and help our Director of Public Works to make a determination. I will not be making any decisions today. Instead, I'll forward the findings from this hearing and make my recommendations to the Director. The Director makes all the final determinations. When the Director's determinations are made, the Department will notify you. Therefore, if you want to be notified, please sign in. The hearing will proceed as follows for each case. I will ask Public Works staff to speak first and present the case. Then I will allow the property owner or appellant to speak. Then any member of the public or witness who wants to speak. Then the department, if the department would like to address any comments, may go again. And then the property owner or the appellant may also go again if that person has any rebuttals. Each speaker will have up to 3 minutes to speak. The clerk will monitor the time for all speakers. When you hear the first bell, it means the speaker has 30 seconds left. A louder second bell will signal that the time is up. Commands and questions should be addressed to me and not to the department or the applicant. If you cannot finish your comments within the allotted time, you may submit written testimony to me by the end of this hearing. If I feel that a question is warranted, I will ask the question. After all comments are completed, I will close the item. We will now begin the hearing, and I'd like to begin first with the case 200509 to consider the removal of 1 street tree without replacement adjacent to 211 Yale Street.
Good evening. My name is Susan Nawberry. I'll be representing the Bureau of Urban Forestry this evening. I just wanted to let you know that Alabama Street, the last case, did postpone. So if anybody is here for that, we won't be presenting for Alabama Street. It has been postponed, and people will be notified at the next hearing.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Sorry. Yes, Alabama Street. Arkansas Street will be going. So our strategic plan is to ensure safe, clean, green infrastructure in public rights of way. This means balancing the objectives of having canopy in the right-of-way that benefits everybody in San Francisco, but also making sure that we mitigate hazards and maintain our street trees to a high standard in order to maintain public trust. So our tree pruning schedule, I know it doesn't seem like it's all very dense in the middle. It looks like we're doing a lot of work there, but that is where the majority of the trees are. And we have pruned 30% of the trees already since implementing Street Tree SF, also known as Prop E in 2017. So I do ask that people be patient when addressing their street tree concerns. And the other reason for bringing this up is to also say that people are applying for removal for street trees, but we do have the maintenance and the responsibility for the street trees, and those are trees in the right-of-way, in the sidewalk. So first order, 211 Yale Street, the removal of one street tree without replacement adjacent to 211 Yale Street. Staff has denied the removal and the owner has appealed. So it's a very small tree, a Calistratidus decurrens, an incense cedar. It has good vigor and fair structure. However, I don't anticipate this tree getting much larger. Again, the city of San Francisco has implemented a pruning schedule, which will address structure and clearances for all street trees on a 3-year cycle. So it does have some poor structure, but with pruning and the fact that this tree actually cannot be replaced, because it's such a small tree, it doesn't really pose a hazard. This is an example of a large tree. That is a very small tree. So I'm just giving you an example of what a large conifer looks like in comparison, and this is still standing, this street tree. So I just wanted to say that we don't just remove trees out of the right-of-way because this is an example of a large tree, and the reason for removal is that that tree is too large. It's very small. It doesn't even really reach past the sign of that, the height of that sign. And again, because of the utility infrastructure, it's not replaceable. The Bureau of Urban Forestry has the liability and the responsibility for maintaining this street tree, and to be consistent with how we handle similar cases, staff denied the removal of this tree. And to be consistent with Street Tree SF, I urge the hearing officer to uphold our denial.
Property owner, appellant may speak now. Please state your name for the record.
My name is Randall Wiley. The house there at 211 Yale Street, I asked for the removal of that tree because it has grown over the past 10 years approximately from 7 to 8 feet to now 18.5 feet. I was by there today, and actually the top of that tree is halfway up that center window right now. It's most of the tree is on the north-facing window on the right side, which you can't see from there, and it had not been over 8 feet until the last year or so, I guess. The tenant, who happens to be my daughter and son-in-law, were supposed to prune the tree, keep it at a certain height. I don't go by there that often, and now it's, like I say, about 18.5 feet. 18.5 feet by the estimate back in August. It's probably another half a foot taller now. Like I said, it's starting to block that window. And I would like to take it down completely so I don't have to maintain it any longer. And I really don't want it to go over the house because there's construction going on at the end of the street. They're putting a housing development at the top of the hill. The neighborhood's being overrun by rats right now, and the tree, if it gets any higher, I'll probably see rats on the roof and maybe raccoons. So I'd like to remove it.
Thank you. Anything further, sir?
Well, I noticed on the denial it says removal without replacement. So if I can take it down and replace it with a smaller tree, I'll even go along with that. Okay.
All right, thank you. Is there anyone from the public who would like to speak on this case? Would the department like to speak further? All right, thank you. This case is now closed. We will make a determination in the mail, and you will be notified. I would now like to call order number 200510 to consider the removal of one street tree without replacement adjacent to 390 Arkansas Street. Department, may you make your presentation?
So staff, so Susan Nauberry with the Bureau of Urban Forestry. Staff approved the removal and the public has protested. Again, I want to bring up the street tree pruning schedule, and the reason why this case is coming to us today is because of our implementation of Street Tree SF. We are inspecting these grids called key maps, and this tree was one of them that came up as a concern. So we went out to inspect them. We do inspect every tree that comes up in these key maps, especially if they're slated for removal. We want to go post them and notify the public. So this is a Prunus cercifera. It's a plum. From this angle, you can't quite see it, but you do see there's two codominant stems, and that's when there's two stems that are basically the same size. And they are both approaching at least half the diameter of the main stem, which definitely is a factor when you are considering if one limb is going to fail. And in this case, it is actively failing. So we posted this tree for removal. Technically, one would post for 15 days as you could post as a hazard tree, but the inspector knew that it was a smaller tree and didn't deem it quite a hazard yet. I have not re-inspected this tree. It looks like it's only splitting on one side. It's been a while since we've seen this tree. It's posted initially in October. The reason why it's not replaceable is because it is too close to the stop sign. So on the left there, it's less than 25 feet to the approach of a stop sign. We don't take this lightly. We do want to replace every single tree we can. But we also are very concerned about vision zero and the visibility of stop signs and approaches to intersections, which also means pedestrian visibility. So I do understand that the canopy of this tree looked vigorous, and I personally would be attached to this tree as well. However, we have to manage the fact that these are street trees that are only going to be maintained at a 3 to 5 year cycle per street tree SF. We can't cable and brace trees because cabling requires a return interval of every 6 months to 1 year, and that is just not sustainable for a small street tree where it eventually may fail and split anyway. So to be consistent with how we handle similar cases, and due to the large split in the main union, we posted this tree for removal for street tree SF, and yes, unfortunately, it cannot be replaced.
Thank you. The property owner or appellant for this case may speak, and please identify yourself by your name for the records. Is there a property owner or appellant for 1390 Arkansas Street? Going, bye, gone. All right, thank you. Further comments? Susan? Oh, no, okay. All right, I'd now like to call order number 200511 to consider the removal of 2 street trees with replacement adjacent to 444-500 Franconia Street. The department may now speak. Please state your name for the record.
Susan Nauberry, Bureau of Urban Forestry. Staff approved the removal, and the public has protested. The trees are replaceable. So it's one Leland cypress, and the second tree is behind it. It's a eucalyptus. So if you look at the way this tree is leaning, and I'm not saying that a lean is a reason to remove a tree, but in this case, it is on a hillside, and these trees have a failure profile of a whole tree failure when on a slope, especially in supersaturated soils. In this case, most of the canopy is on the downhill side of the tree, and although conifers operate by compression, which is where they put their reaction wood on the downhill side of the lean and they push the tree up, that's how conifers operate with a lean. This tree in particular doesn't appear to have any reaction wood on the downhill side. It's just sticking kind of straight up out of the hillside. And so what you want to see in a conifer that's putting good reaction wood to combat that lean is like a swell on the downhill side. And this one just isn't really putting it on. And because it's a hillside and they have a whole tree failure profile, to be consistent with how we handle similar trees, we approved this one for removal. And then the second tree, Oh, so I just want to show you the structure first of the cypress. It's all of the canopy on one side, and that's not normally an issue. Trees react to imbalance by putting on reaction wood, but in this case, since it doesn't have very good reaction wood, we approved the tree for removal. It also has a lot of included bark. So Leland cypress have a history of whole tree failure. This is one at USF. It's much larger, different tree than what we showed before. And that had super saturated soils. It didn't even have a lean or a hillside, and that whole tree failed. It's not an exact science. You can't always predict it. But in the case of this tree, the lack of reaction wood on the downhill side does concern me. So the second tree, silver dollar eucalyptus, Eucalyptus polyanthemos. This tree has very poor structure. It's a little hard to tell. The canopy, it's a tree on the right. So if you're looking at the left photo, it's a tree on the right. And it has a thinning canopy. So it is in decline, and it probably has to do with how crowded it is in there. It's lacking nutrients to put on good canopy. And it also has very poor structure, so it has a sweep. And it kind of just goes. That's a little bit to get away from the lean, get away from the shade, to put on wood to go out of the shade of that cypress. But also, when you have structure like that, it can cause like a sail, and it can cause what's known as torsional failure. And so is the canopy acting as a sail on the bend in the main stem. When the wind blows at high enough speed, it can create like a torsional failure. And again, since it's on a hillside, it was a little bit of a concern for anyone below that. And mainly the tree has poor structure and a declining canopy, so we don't know how much longer it's actually going to be there. And I do want to emphasize that both these trees, there is room for replacement. So sorry about the photo quality. It's a little difficult to get a good photo. But the structure is very poor, so it doesn't have the form that you'd want to see on a tree where it has good branching attachments and a straight bole that would reduce what's known as torsional failure. So it does have codominant stems, which we discussed earlier, as each stem on either side approach half the size or more of the main stem that can lead to failure. So this tree has included bark too in that union, which is hard to see in these dark photos, so I apologize for that. So to be consistent with how we handle similar cases and the condition of these trees, as well as the site conditions, Urban Forestry approved the removals of these trees with replacement.
The property owner or appellant to this case may approach the mic and appeal. Property owner appellant for 444-500 Franconia. Going, gone. Thank you. Yes, you may, ma'am. May you step to the mic and just state your name? You can hand those to the clerk.
My name is Lisa Layton. My name is Lisa Layton. I live at 651 Peralta, which is also right on that Mayflower. The Mayflower lot is actually an unaccepted street, and there are 4 properties that border on that lot, and I am in one of the properties. I'm uphill from this tree, from these 2 trees. And I've got letters here from 3 of the other property owners whose properties border this lot, and from one of the property owners whose home is across the street from these trees. And we're actually here to support DPW's decision to remove these trees. We've been actually trying to get the city to help us with these trees for a couple of years now. About 2 years ago, the eucalyptus dropped a gigantic branch that took out my side fence. Cost me $6,000 to replace it. At this point, we're all really frightened, especially about the fir tree. It leans very far over the property at 500 Franconia Street, and I do have a letter from that property owner. I don't know how familiar you are with Bernal Heights, but it's a very, very windy part of the city.
Okay.
And if that tree is leaning to the southeast, If it does fail, it's either going to smack his house, and it's a small wood frame structure. He's a single father with 2 little boys. Or it's going to go out into the street. It's going to hit the parked cars. It's going to take out a street light that is directly below it. It's about a 3.5-story tree. It's a very large tree. It could wind up hitting the house across the street, and the fellow who lives across the street has also sent in a letter supporting removal of this tree. And even more scary, what you can't see in any of those photos is that very steep lot is held up by a 2.5-foot retaining wall. Those trees are only about a yard and a half back from that retaining wall, which means that if those trees fail in the direction of the retaining wall, it could take out the whole retaining wall, and then all bets are off. There's going to be soil in the street. The whole hill is going to fail. There are 2 gigantic eucalyptus trees just slightly uphill from that will go if the retaining wall fails. We all really understand the concerns of whoever it is that protested about losing trees. But I did want to put it in the record that we have applied for official street park status. We'll be going through a community process about beautifying the entire lot. And if the consensus of the community as we go through that design process is that those trees are going to be replaced, that'll be part of our grant request, and we'll replace them. So,
Thank you.
thank you.
Anyone else? Public Works, anything further on this item? Okay, thank you. Now I'd like to call order number 200512 to consider the removal of 1 street tree without replacement adjacent to 601 Van Ness Avenue.
So staff has denied the removal and the applicant has appealed. So it's 1 Corymbia Faecifolia. The site cannot be replaced. Despite what it looks like in this photo, it's actually somewhat of a large stature tree. And for San Francisco, it's 17 inches in diameter. And just to be fully transparent, you can see the structure of this tree. It does have somewhat weak attachments, but also, and you can't quite tell in the light, but it does have a floor canopy, and that's why our inspector initially denied it, because it can't be replaced and it is a loss of canopy. So, per the plans, they'll be installing a vault, I believe, and the applicant can correct me. But it's like right in the footprint of that tree. I just want to point out, I think somebody indicated that wound was a flaw of some sort, but I just want to point out with Corymbia, like that kind of weeping in the trunk is very typical, and that's not really a concern. But I did want to point out that the root flare is a little bit buried on that tree. And another thing is that it's not replaceable in the site that it is now, and also that it is like a large stature tree, that it does have some diameter, which is why we initially denied it. It's a loss of canopy. But because of that, I did also appraise the tree. Sorry, you can't see it, but basically this is our tree appraisal spreadsheet. And even after reducing the rating initially for structure, it did still appraise to be a $7,300 tree. And I don't mean to spring this on anyone, I just kind of decided to appraise it after reviewing the photos. Because it is a loss of canopy, and it is a lot of, you don't see a 17-inch diameter tree in the city very often anymore, and it takes a lot of energy, time, and resources. It pulls a lot of carbon dioxide out of the air and provides a lot of benefits to people, even with poor structure. So I did want to appraise the tree and let you know that the value of this tree, and before structure was poor, was probably higher. So I just want to point out that only in this current state is it worth $7,300. And that's only because it has poor structure, but it is still providing benefits.
What type of tree is it again? I'm sorry.
Corymbia Faecifolia, it's a red flowering gum.
Okay. Thank you. Anyone from the public or the property owner wishing to appeal this may now step to the mic and State your name for the record, please.
Hello.
Yeah, please speak to
Hello.
one of the mics.
Hi, my name is Brenda Chavez. I'm here for the property owner.
Bring it down, so.
I'm just here in support of the project.
Hi, my name is Robin Swartout, and I'm with Tesla,
All right.
the applicant, and I have a couple of slides to show.
Could you kind of speak to the mic a little bit so
Sure.
we can hear your voice?
One moment. Can you hear me?
Yes, I
Okay,
can.
Perfect.
All right.
There we go. So just to give you some context for why we're applying to remove this tree, we are, from Tesla, putting in a vehicle charging station at 601 Van Ness. To give you some context for how vehicle charging works, there are really three main kinds of charging. There's level 1, which is basically your standard wall outlet. There's level 2, which is what you might see in front of a Walgreens or something like that. It takes about 4 to 10 hours to charge a car. What we're proposing here is a level 3 DC fast charging station, which is something that's one of the city's priorities to develop more of these. It takes about 1 hour to give a car a full charge, and that's about 300 miles. The proposed station here would be 12 charging stalls of DC fast charging, and it would be the first supercharger station in San Francisco. So that would be really the first way that Tesla cars, which are the dominant EV on the road in San Francisco, would be able to have access to fast charging. And this is more context for where the site is located within the city. This is showing the same plans that the DPW has already presented. This shows the removal area that we would need to excavate up along the sidewalk. PG&E requires us to install 2 vaults in order to bring new power to the site to provide power to these charging stations. And unfortunately, the tree that is at issue right now is located right where those vaults are going. We have scoured the site thoroughly and looked for locations where we could place these vaults without removing a tree. And unfortunately, there are not any. And this just shows the locations of the vaults from PG&E after removal. Again, more photos of the tree. And just to provide a bit more context for why this type of charging that we're providing is significant and important for San Francisco, about 2/3 of residents live in multi-unit apartment buildings and so don't have access to charging within their homes necessarily. So in order to have broader scale EV adoption within the city, providing charging such as these supercharger stations is essential. And again, 1/3 of residents park on the street. Additionally, the Tesla vehicles that are on the road today are resulting in lots of carbon savings, including about close to 90 pounds per capita within San Francisco for the cars that are on the road here. And finally, we are open to mitigation opportunities. Unfortunately, the block here where the tree is located does not have any locations that we're aware of where it would be possible to replace the tree and put in a new one. However, we're very open to working with DPW to either install new trees elsewhere, plant them, or in lieu of fees or contributions.
Could you go back to the pictures of the trees real quick? One more. On the far right, it's like one tree, the tree in the front there, right by the
That's correct.
Nissan. Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else from the public wishing to, all right, ma'am, you may sit down. Thank you. Wishing to speak regarding this matter, please state your name for the record.
My name is John Nolte. I'm representing Tenor Lane Tree Campaign. First, I was going to applaud DPW for placing overhead, please, this on the tree, but apparently this is not the same tree that they were referring to. This is a eucalyptus tree, and they were referring to another tree. So I have a problem just because I was applauding this because this sign says tonight's hearing, and that's the first time I've ever seen one. So I thought we were being proactive here and putting it on the right tree, but apparently you're not, because this is the corner tree, and this is not the corner tree for this thing. Secondly, this is on Golden Gate, and 2 blocks down is a PUC building, which has what? Charging stations. So I don't see why Tesla are coming to our neighborhood only when we have charging stations 2 blocks down in front of the San Francisco PUC building. Why are we doing this? So this is an embarrassment to Tesla to be able to come into our neighborhood and then take out a tree worth, as the lady said, $7,000, and here we have charging stations down the block, 1 block down, on Golden Gate, outside the PUC building, which is more appropriate to have because they already have the infrastructure for it. So maybe they should be working with PUC versus DPW. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Anyone else from the public wishing to speak regarding this item, please step up to the microphone.
Hi, my name is Josh Klipp. I'm a resident of San Francisco. I am an attorney and also a volunteer planting leader with Friends of the Urban Forest. I've planted with FUF for over 9 years and have probably put about 700 trees into the ground here in San Francisco, which means I have a pretty good idea of what it takes for a street tree to establish in this city. And it is incredibly difficult for a street tree to establish, let alone reach a DBH of 17 inches. And especially difficult for trees to establish on busy corridors such as this one. Just one quick question that I would put to Public Works, which is whether the vault placement has been evaluated by a civil engineer with the city as opposed to an arborist, and whether it is in compliance with Public Works vault placement schedule. I would also note that per the Van Ness BRT process, almost 100 trees were just taken down along the Van Ness corridor. So I would say that this would lean heavily against any additional unnecessary removals. Effectively, what this is doing is taking out a tree for a parking space that presumes that somebody who lives in San Francisco can drive a Tesla and afford that and park it there to begin with. But even so, it's a parking space nonetheless, because there is no enforceable rule on the books for only Teslas are allowed to park here. There's no way to enforce that would actually be utilized as a charging station. Finally, I would just want to make sure that it's on the record that I would like a copy of the decision in here, because if removal is granted, that is something I would appeal. Thank you.
Thank you. And as stated at the beginning, sign in if you want a copy of the determination. Okay. Anyone else from the public wanting to speak on this item? Public Works, would you like to speak further on this item?
Just to clarify that the property is 601 Van Ness, the tree is on Golden Gate, and the assessed value can act as the in lieu fee.
Okay, thank you. Property owner, appellant, do you wish to add some more comments? Okay, thank you. If these are all the comments and all the items on the agenda have been heard and for this evening, then this hearing is formally closed. All determinations will be made and sent to everyone who has signed in if you wish to receive a copy within 10 business days. Thank you.